I kept saying, did I just see what I saw? Did I just see what I saw? So I called a friend up. She said, well, I think a portal opened. I said, I think you're right. So I took my little dowsing rods. I had dowsing rods, and I went out and I said, I'm going to find this spot because something opened up. And I went out there and found the spot with my dowsing rods. Of course, me always being oh, is it right? Is it right? I'm not really a dowser, but I kept checking and checking. And all of a sudden I hear this cheep, cheep, this whole flock of birds circling around my head, just circling around my head. I'm going, okay, I guess I got the spot, you know. And so I marked the spot, so I would know where this came up. 2 weeks later, four ladies show up to the garden. One of them does nothing but anchors portal.
Welcome to Soul Explorers with your hosts, Gary Langley and Sally Taylor. Welcome to Soul Explorers. Today, Sally and I have a real treat for you. We have mystic and medium Susan Sanderford with us. Susan, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Oh, so are we. And I have so many different things that I want to talk to you about. But would you start us off just by giving us just a brief backstory of how you became a spiritual teacher and medium to begin with? It's not sort of a path that the average human being goes down. What is it that brought you to this point where you are now?
Well, I had a spiritual awakening in 1993, and it sort of came about. I was born and raised fundamentalist Christian, and it came about because I sat down on the couch one day. I was in this miserable marriage. And I said, God, where are you? I pray. I've done it right. I went to Bible school, went to Bible college. I taught Sunday school. I did all the things, that you're supposed to do as a fundamentalist Christian. And yet I was miserable. I was miserable in this marriage. And I said, God, where are you? I must be doing something wrong. And this thought came into my head. And I said, you know what? I'm going to throw all that out the window. And God, I want you to show me what truth is. And so little did I know that that was the beginning of my spiritual journey, because I invited the divine, God itself, to be my teacher, and I let go of the man's way of finding out God. And I just wanted to know God was real. So it was really more about seeking truth, trying to seek truth and trying to see the answers. And so that's how it started. And then that's when all the mystical and metaphysical experiences started happening in my life. And I wouldn't say that any bells or whistles went off that day. But what happened was that in this miserable marriage, I realized, gosh, this isn't what love is. And so I asked God to show me what love is. I mean, it's such a long journey, and I'm trying to shorten it into like a few minutes, but it's a really long story. But needless to say, I ended up owning this little newspaper, and my husband Milt now, at the time, came to work with me. And then that's when I realized that God brought him into my life to show me what love was. And that's a whole story in itself. But having gone on a spiritual journey, how can you serve the divine unless you know what divine love is? How can you express it in the world unless you experience it? And so that's what I learned about the spiritual journey, is that it's more of an experience than it is like reading a book or reading Bible verses or that kind of. It's kind of like riding a bike. You can read all you want to about riding a bike, but unless you experience it, you don't know how to do it. It's the same way with God or divine spirit or universe or whatever you want to call it, that unseen loving presence that I invited into my life, but I didn't know what was going to happen. I just did it. So that was the beginning of my spiritual journey, where I invited it in and then it went to work. So I think on our spiritual journeys, that's sort of like, there's always this catalyst in our lives whether it's losing a loved one or being in a miserable marriage or a house burning down or something, that all we have left is we're laying on the floor. We have to look up and say, okay, what's this, And so it was just that typical spiritual journey, but I went straight to source. I didn't go looking to communicate with spirits. I didn't go looking to do that, but it was my husband Milt that introduced me to this whole concept of that you could communicate with the other side. And this was before we came together, and we were talking at work one day, and he was telling me about his wife Mary Jane, who had passed over from cancer, and how he went to this trance medium. And because I was really good friends with Milt, I trusted him, even though I was a fundamentalist Christian, and that would have been considered a no-no. I trusted him, and we talked about his experiences with a trance medium, and he heard from Mary Jane, his wife, in that session. And so anyway, that night I had the most amazing dream. And I had said to Milt that day, I said, well, I wonder how my grandfather is doing. Because at the time, that was the closest person that had passed away to me. And that night I had this most amazing dream. And in the dream, I walked into this morgue, and there was my grandfather's old dead body laying on the table. And I walked up to it, and he sat up, and he transformed into this most beautiful looking young man, brilliant light. Just, I'm getting chills now. Brilliant light, and he just smiled at me. And I thought, wow. And so I couldn't wait to go back and tell Milt the next day, oh, you're not going to believe what happened. And that was my first ever spirit communication. I had never thought you could do it. I never thought, the dead were dead and you would never hear from them again. I mean, that's what my religion taught me, so I was still in this transition between finding out truth. And that's what opened this whole idea of that you can communicate with spirit. And then so I thought, well, I'm going to try this again. I'm really going to try this again. And I said, I wonder how my grandmother is doing. And so I didn't get a dream that night. But 2 weeks later, I woke up in the dream, and there was my grandmother sitting across at a picnic table from me. And she goes, oh, I'm just making sure your angels get fed and making sure you guys get fed. And it made so much sense because my grandmother owned a restaurant all her life, and that's how she showed her love. She fed you, whether it was from cheesecake or everything. And my grandmother, if anybody was going to be in hell, I thought it would be my grandmother, because she was the crustiest old woman that you could ever experience, And here she was, and she was in this really great place. So that woke my eyes up to the fact that, oh, wow, you can communicate. But really, after those two dreams, that's when God brought Milt and I together, so I know what love is, And I was the one that told him, I said, oh, by the way, God brought you into my life so I know what love is. I mean, there was no flirting. There was no interest in each other. He was this nice little bachelor because he's 24 years older than me. So I told him that, and he goes, I know. And then we came together then, which started the spiritual journey. And so when I realized that deep spiritual love was there, I thought, well, how can I not do this? How can I, when he leaves the planet, which he thinks he's never going to leave because he says, I'm 93 and I'm still here, But my interest in communicating with spirit came about because I didn't want to lose connection with Milt. It wasn't about I wanted to do readings. It wasn't about anything else, that I didn't want to lose this really special love connection that God brought into my life. So by this time, Milt had introduced me to Edgar Cayce, and I started reading his books, which made it okay with me, as a Christian, that this was okay. And I started exploring, and I started meditating. And so one day I thought, well, I'll just sit down. This is before Milt and I had got married, and I was in my own house with my kids. And I thought, oh, well, I'm going to meditate. And so I started, sitting at my computer and just typing in. And then I sort of felt spirit, you know how that feels, you guys, how that feels. And I go, well, how do I know this is real? That's what I put out. And it came back, the voice came back, and I wouldn't say a voice, but the thought came back. Well, there's 12 cans of food in your pantry. Now, have you ever counted the cans of food in your pantry? So I went looking in my
Never.
pantry, and sure enough, there were 12. And I go, I want more proof. And they said, well, you have 32 bath towels in your house. So I'm like a mad woman counting all my bath towels in my house. And sure enough, there were 32. And I go back and I go, I want more proof. And they said, well, there's 16 pennies up on your mantle. One of the kids must have put it up there. Sure enough, there were 16 pennies sitting on the mantle. I go back, I want more proof. And they said, no, you either believe or you don't believe. And it was that moment of having to choose to believe. Now, this is what's interesting. When Mary Jane died, Milt's wife died in 81 or something like that. He went to the trance medium. Her name was Hester B. Jackson. And he got really close with her, and they planned on doing work together because Milt's way ahead of his time. You know, he's one of these earlier come in, guys. But he got to be good friends with her. They were going to do work together. And then after 2 years, she passed away. And Hester said, well, one day we're going to work together. But then she died. So when I asked, come back to present, who am I talking to? The name clearly came back, Hester B. Jackson.
And Susan, there's a wonderful story around that's in your book, which you're going to offer to our viewers and listeners a way to get a copy of this book. But there's a wonderful story that medium, connecting with you from the other side, decided to play a trick on Milt, and that was the 3 knocks. Would you share that story with us?
Yes, this was again before we had come together and moved in together. One time when I was meditating, I was trying to go to sleep, and I heard Spirit say, well, go up to Milt's door in your mind and knock 3 times. So I did it. And they said, well, do it again. And I went and knocked on his door 3 times, bing, bing, bing. And so Milt called that night, and nothing happened. He didn't say anything about it. I hadn't told him about it. I didn't say, and I thought, oh, see, this is a bunch of bull crap, But the next night he called and says, somebody knocked at my door. It was fully the next night, and knocked at my door 3 times. And then it happened again on the back door where nobody can get in. And he said the hair stood up on the back of my neck. And of course, I was just floored because the trick had worked, but it didn't happen in my timing. And that was the whole lesson, that sometimes things don't happen in the timing that we think they should be. They happen when you least expect it. So that was one of the fun, my earlier experiences with spirit. But that's how my mediumship abilities started, not because I wanted to be a medium. Matter of fact, one of my books is The Reluctant Medium. I'm one of those that fingernails along the wall and feet, and like, no, I don't want to go here. God, you don't want me to do this, And so the book is called The Reluctant Medium because I just so resisted that. I didn't want to be this. I only did this because I didn't want to lose contact with Milt. But Spirit had other plans, and it was the tool or the catalyst to get me to awaken to my mediumship abilities. And I think a lot of it too was for not to be that, but for my own personal growth, my own spiritual growth. And then also, I've always felt my mediumship work, which I did for 28 years. I've sort of backed off it because I've got Spirit's pushing me in another direction. Well, it was also to lead people into our lives so I can help them grow from that point. Because once you find out your loved one is okay, there's another world out there, then what do you do? Where do you go from there? How do you grow spiritually? What's the next step? What happens on a spiritual journey? And really we take people from that point onward to realize that everything that's happened in their life, even the death of their loved ones, has been all a pre-planned thing for your own spiritual growth, for your own enlightenment, for your own getting into your heart and opening your heart. What I found with mediumship work is that people who've lost loved ones is such a heart open experience. The grief opens the heart at such a deep level, which is what I've found in my own journey is my greatest spiritual moments have been in my deepest grief. And that grief is a great teacher and a friend, and you got to invite that pain in for a cup of tea and see what it's there for you in that, so that you can come to acceptance of that all is perfect, even though we can't see it. Everything is absolutely perfect. So yeah, I did mediumship readings for about 28 years. We followed spirit all those times. We lived in Florida and sold everything and moved to Virginia Beach and lived there for a while, and spirit moved us to Sedona and then moved us to Australia and then moved us back here, which I think all of that was the setup for this work, that creating this healing place or this healing center called Casa de Santa Maria, which is a sacred space for people to heal and to learn and to grow on their spiritual journey.
Tell us a little more about the Casa, because I think it's an incredibly powerful place. You mentioned something about a vortex opening there, and our viewers are very open to that kind of thing. So we would love to hear a little more about the Casa, and also that it is a non-denominational denominational place, because I love the story when Milt first had a communication with Mother Mary. He said, "But I'm not Catholic," and she said, "Neither am I." Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah,
So
it really came about because we had gone on with a spiritual pilgrimage with a group of people to Brazil, and then this was actually almost 20 years ago. And we were having at a mass, and oftentimes the way spirit works with me is they write. I call it my third eye chalkboard. They write stuff out for me. I don't know why they do it that way, but it was like we were told, go to Brazil, go on this trip, go, and then they wouldn't leave me alone, till we did it. So I'm sitting there, we're sitting there in the mass, and I'm meditating because it was a spiritual group. We call ourselves spiritual, but not religious. And Jesus, I feel Jesus' spirit. He says, we need you to create a casa, and it's to be called Casa de Santa Maria. And I said, well, what about you? And he goes, it's for my mother. And I just felt this absolutely reverence and love he had for his mother, almost more than himself. Do you know what I mean? I actually met Mother Mary in Medjugorje. Are you familiar with Medjugorje? It's where she appeared to the 6 Bosnian children. And I was called to go. I mean, they wouldn't leave me alone. Written out, go to Medjugorje, go to Medjugorje. But and so when we were living in Australia, we couldn't get 2 tickets, so I had to go by myself, which I was terrified to do, but I did it anyway from Australia. And I was so taken care of, you wouldn't believe. But the first day I was there, I was sitting and meditating in front of her statue in front of St. James Church. And I said, God, why am I here? I'm not even Catholic. And I hear this audible female voice that says, you've invited Jesus into your heart. Now you're going to invite me. And just boom, my heart just opened. It totally understood the whole divine mother thing. If there's a father, there's got to be a mother. It made a whole lot of sense. And so that was when I first met her. And when she came into my life, I had to go all the way to Bosnia in Medjugorje to meet her. And so as my relationship developed with her, what she did in my life as she came into life was she taught me how to love me, which is really hard for people that have come out of religious backgrounds, because you're taught you're this sinner, you're never going to measure up to God, And if I may I share one of my favorite messages? So, which tells the spiritual journey in a nutshell, but it goes, my dearest child, you are the miracle you have been seeking. You are the heart you want to find. You are God's gift to the world. You have been created as divine. You are my heart. I am yours. There is nothing separating the two. You are my beloved child. My gift to you is you.
That's beautiful.
So when she comes into your life, that's what she does. She teaches you how to love you. She shows you your divinity. And that's what the whole spiritual journey is all about, is recognizing that you are a thought of God. God thought of you And therefore, that's where your worth comes from. Gary, did you have a question?
Yeah, Sally and I were having this discussion before you came on that we both had experiences with her in some degree. And the overwhelming sense was so much unconditional love.
Absolutely.
And a gentleness, a mother's gentleness, you know. And we both shared that we had felt that same thing when we experienced her.
Excellent. And I mean, she's so lovely. And so, anyway, when we set the Casa is about her healing presence, and her holy helpers will come to help you heal. So, that spirit, her gentle, loving spirit, is literally resides on the land to help you heal when you come visit the Casa. Because it's taken us forever. We told Spirit we weren't going to go into debt to do this. We weren't going to get loans. If she wanted it, she had to make it happen. And we finally are almost done with our little retreat center. We're gluing paper on the floor right now, putting mandalas and that kind of thing. And so hopefully by fall we're going to be able to start doing intuitive heart retreats and having people come here for retreats and those kind of things. It just has taken a while, but it is what it is, and exactly what we need. But what happened? Let's go back to the portal vortex story, and I have some cool pictures. Maybe I can send them to if you want to pop them in.
Absolutely. Yep, we can add them to the video.
Right, because I have a really cool picture of right after we put the building up on Easter morning in the clouds. It's the shape of Mother Mary looking down on the building and a beautiful heart in the clouds right over her head. So it's really cool shot. And then a couple of weeks later, I went into the hall and we were looking for orbs. You know how you take pictures looking for orbs. And there were 4 blue angels in the building coming into the window. And the energy in that building was off the charts for months. I mean, you could still feel the energy, but it just would knock your socks off. Then I later found out that those were archangels. They weren't just angels, they were archangels coming in to let us know that they were at work with us. But April 30th of 2023, maybe 2022. Now, see, I should have written this down. I'm out gardening, because we've got Mother Mary's garden. We built a 300 square foot diameter prayer and meditation garden. It has 2 labyrinths, a medicine wheel, a little stone circle, a little prayer chapel, a ceremonial fire pit, what I call the Christ Child Circle. So it's a place you can come visit and meditate in the garden. But so I was out weeding, which you have to do forever. You probably know this, Gary. Mm-hmm. And about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I came out, and it was the first day. It wasn't windy, but this huge whirlwind started up about 300 feet just to the east side of the garden. It was huge. It was like 100 feet. It wasn't a dirt devil. It wasn't moving. It was in one spot, just, and tumbleweed are flying, and there's a box flying, and there's a white piece of paper, and I'm looking at this white piece of paper because I wanted to know where it landed, because I wanted to go pick it up. I wanted to pick up a box. So I'm watching this white piece of paper. All of a sudden it flips out wings, and it's a white dove. And it starts playing around in the what do you call it, whirlwind. Like, oh, isn't this fun? And then it flies out of the whirlwind toward this statue. We have a 10.5-foot totem pole carving of Mother Mary sitting in the center of the garden. Flies toward the statue, then heads north toward Mount Blanca, hits the property line, and goes poof, like into another dimension.
Wow.
And I'm standing there looking, going, I kept saying, did I just see what I saw? Did I just see what I saw? So I called a friend up. She said, well, I think a portal opened. I said, I think you're right. So I took my little dowsing rods. I had dowsing rods, and I went out and I said, I'm going to find this spot because something opened up, and I went out there and found the spot with my dowsing rods. Of course, me always being is it right? Is it right? I'm not really a dowser, but I kept checking and checking, and all of a sudden I heard this cheep, cheep. this whole flock of birds circling around my head, just circling around my head. I'm going, okay, I guess I got the spot, you know. And so I marked the spot, you know, so I would know where this came up. 2 weeks later, 4 ladies show up to the garden. One of them does nothing but anchors portal. And we become really good friends with Christy Adams is her name. And she comes back every once in a while. And she's one of these kind of almost like a little lightning rod. She feels the energy in her body and it's like, you know. And so she works with portals. And so she anchored the portal and it's a heart portal. And there were a couple of ladies out here a couple of weeks ago, and this one lady was here. She says, you know, look at this. This is right in alignment with the divine masculine labyrinth and the peak of the mountain, Culebra Peak. And she goes, oh, this is the spot where the divine feminine and the divine masculine meet. And we all just got gob bumps, you know. And so by now the portal has grown. You can feel it when you walk into it if you're really good at feeling energy. But its purpose is to really shake loose that which is in you that you're holding on to that needs healing. So it's a vibratory kind of play, kind of like Sedona. You both have been to Sedona, right? And
Oh,
you
yeah.
know how it triggers, you know, it's that same vortex kind of energy that if you're carrying dark stuff, it's going to come up and multiply 10 times for you to notice it. Same thing. And, but the cool thing, it helps you release it a lot faster. You know what I mean? So that's kind of cool of the energy that's opened up here. And, you know, we really haven't advertised the Casa very much, mainly because it hadn't been a place other than the garden that you can come to the garden, meditate and that kind of thing. But we haven't really had it to the point where we can say, oh, let's bring people into retreats, but we're just getting to that point. I think that's why Spirit kicked me out of my town manager job. And they put me in it there for a while. I mean, they knew they wanted me in it. And it was I learned so much. I realized I was smarter than I realized. And, you know, I brought in over $3 million in grant funding to the town, never written grants, that kind of thing. Spirit was so present in that. But then they said, okay, now we're done. Now it's time to work on the Casa. But I felt that Vortex was open was kind of an announcement of, okay, now things are getting ready for whatever this healing place, because it really is an energetic healing place. It's, you know, it's not as much about me or Milt, although we're the anchors of creating it and getting it into manifestation. It's about creating that sacred space for spirit to reside, to work on people that are really serious about their spiritual journey, that really want to heal, that really want to come to peace and really to find or awaken their own heart and divinity within.
Let me ask you a question about this, because I've actually had several personal experiences with portals and vortices in a wide variety of ways. Do you feel like it was your intention and your presence that allowed this portal or this vortex to open a portal for you in this space for the work? Or do you perceive it as being something that was inherent in the earth itself? Kind of give us a little information about how you understand portals and vortexes.
Well, I think that's a really interesting question and one I have really thought about, because it's not something that I intentionally said, I want a vortex to open up here. I want a portal. It's something that was not in my consciousness. I knew that spirit's presence was here, and I think it was because of what we created, but also the San Luis Valley is highly, highly mystically charged, if that makes sense. So I think it's a little bit of both, Sally, you know. I think it was waiting for the right people who honored the land and that kind of thing to assist in what's happening here. I don't think it would have happened across the street.
It seems that you were led around the world in many instances to visit locations that would be significant to you energetically in some way or another. And I would say that it seems to me that San Luis and Casa de Santa Maria is kind of the culmination of those experiences, in that, as you've traveled the world, you've become sensitive to the energy of place, so to speak. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a whole lot of sense, and haven't thought of it that way. But when I went to Medjugorje, it was literally like being in the mother's womb. And how would I know what that feels to bring that energy back, to create it here? That divine mother's love. I mean, really think about it. Most religions don't know what to do with Mother Mary. They don't. Catholics honor her and that kind of thing. Everybody else says, "Oh, this is Mother Jesus." And like for me, awakening that she has a divine role, especially now, because people have been so cut off from that divine feminine energy, which we need to know how loved we are, unconditionally loved we are. And really think about it. Most of us grew up with nice parents and great parents, or a nice childhood, blah blah blah. But they also weren't very emotionally. They were kind of emotionally neglectful, or not emotionally present, which is what children really need. And so then when we don't get that emotional nurturing, and it doesn't mean they didn't love us, but you understand what I mean, the emotional connection, heart connection. I mean, we live in a society where there's hardly any heart connection.
Yeah. I think Trudy brought this up in her book, that and which is the book we're going to talk about a little more shortly, but that we value the wrong things here. Instead of our pursuing our spiritual awareness, we focus on mundane things and think those are important. And that really struck me when I read that, because I was just reviewing the book this morning. And that phrase struck me because it's so true. People, it's become atrophied in us to be aware. And when I say us, I don't mean us, I mean people in general, to be aware of that side of life, because it's the bigger side of life.
Exactly. And we get so caught up here, and most of us, I always say the spiritual journey is really just a matter of a foot. It's from here to here.
Yeah.
Most of us are caught up in our head, and we don't know that the heart carries its own wisdom.
Yeah.
I think it's the Institute of Math. What is it called? Heart Math, that says that the heart has the same type of cells that the brain does, like
Mhm.
a bunch of them, and then you move into the wisdom, and that's where your connection is in the heart space with the divine. I mean, once you get the heart open, boom, up here, you're going straight to source. But if your heart's not open, or you've never experienced it, and then it always goes back to my asking God, what is love? Never thought it would come through another person. I thought I would never experience, oh, this is what love is, divine love is, And if you take it back to the Bible, love is patient, kind, all the old, but without love, you are nothing. Without love. And that's why this is a heart space to help people heal their wounds, no matter what it is, whether it's grief or, whatever, it's about giving people the tools to move into their heart space, hear their own inner teacher, their own divine guidance, to move through life instead of in the head, in the ego, which of course we know never really works, very good. But, one of the retreats, the first retreat we're going to do is called Intuitive Heart. And it's about how to move into the heart space, how you can get your own divine connection with God for yourself and for others. And of course, you guys know it's hard to get it for yourself than it is for others, but it's about how do we get this space open, because that is what's going to change the world. It's not going to be our politicians. It's not going to be anything. It's we people have to move into their heart space, get their divine connection, and start following it. And that's what's going to revolutionize the world. And that's what we need to focus on.
I applaud you for that statement. That I could not agree with you more. So we hear a lot about we're going through this critical transition. The Earth's going through it. Humans are being transformed through it. What information have you received concerning this phase or time period that we're now in?
To be honest, I'm more riding the wave of it than focusing on what's happening, because we know it's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it's more of an experience than it is a thinking about it, if that makes sense. Like I just processed, this whole big thing I just learned a couple of weeks ago. It was huge. Didn't even know I was holding on to that wound. And it goes back to that being raised without emotional support, emotional loving. And so what happens when you aren't unconditionally loved, especially in religion, because a lot of times there's judgment there. You've got to do this, you've got to be this way, you can't be that way, blah blah blah. So then your little inner child gets all wigged out, and then you become a people pleaser. Then you become trying to make everybody happy,
Right.
and then you find out you can't do it. And when you can't do it, or when someone doesn't see all that love that you give to them, it devastates you. And that was just a big wound I just healed last month. And it was just so huge. I mean, I cried for 2 weeks because I realized that, oh my God, that's what I've been doing all my life, is that all my OCD tendencies, my perfectionism tendencies was about, I wanted to feel that unconditional love from people. And if I give it to them, they're going to give it back to me. And I realized it was a pattern that I carried throughout my life that just came up with the energies coming in, that finally says, you got to let that go, which is really interesting. In that, after you let go of that, you go, well, who am I now? I have a good spirit friend named Dr. Peebles. I don't know if you know Dr. Peebles,
Mm-hmm.
but he goes, well, you are you. And that's all there is. So go ahead, Gary. Sorry.
Well, the phrase came into my mind when you said that you have to be the unconditional love and not look for it externally so much.
Right.
Um,
Exactly. Yeah.
and then when you are that, or even approaching that, because it's a never-ending process. There is no I've arrived. We're always growing. But when you're approaching that, it's coming back. It's coming to meet you. It's the prodigal son. It's coming to meet you as you're coming back to it.
Right. Exactly. And what I love about this journey is I'm still healing my stuff. The minute you think you arrived, you haven't.
No.
Our dear spirit friend, Dr. Peebles, always says, well, if you figure it all out in this lifetime, then what are you going to do? It's like, it's that never ending journey of discovery, of exploration. And of course, on the spiritual journey, it's the brave person that's willing to go into their pain and meet it and let it be a teacher. Our society teaches us that it's weakness if we cry, or if we're angry, and I mean, that's taking away our humanity. That's what we've come here to learn from, is these emotional patterns. And so what's happening energetically, there's really a microcosm and a macrocosm. So on an individual journey, shit happens, and it shakes person's life to the core, that brings up this awakening. Well, that's what's happening on the planet, is the energies are shaking everything to the core, where, oh my God, this is bad. I mean, there's some that think it's good, blah, 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 depending on your viewpoint. But it's an awakening of the collective consciousness.
Right.
Of, we're going to bring stuff into your life that you don't like until you decide differently, until you decide, I'm going to love this instead of hate it. I'm going to embrace it because it's my teacher, not my enemy. And so what we're seeing now, the energies, to answer that question, Gary, is that the energies are literally like an energetic bomb that's gone off in a collective consciousness life to shake things up so that we're all going, what the hell just happened? And then we start looking for a different answer. We start recognizing that maybe there's an unseen world that I can interact with that can help me through instead of me doing it on my own with the ego and that kind of thing. I always love the old joke that, there's 3 stages of life. Stage number 1 is you're born. Stage number 2 is, what the hell is this? And stage number 3 is you die. But it's in the what the hell is this where the transformation takes place if you choose to say there's and reach out to that unseen world and invite it in. And so I always say the spiritual journey is about that invitation. And then it usually happens with a wake-up call. Wait, something's not right. My religion didn't teach me right. I don't know, inviting truth in. And that, just open that door a little bit to say there's got to be more, is the seed that's planted in the spiritual journey of inviting that there's got to be more. And a lot of it happens through losing a loved one. Sally, like in your case, it was like that was the bomb, energetic, emotional bomb that went off in your life that made you open up to think, oh, there's got to be more out.
That's absolutely true. Well, I find it really interesting too that you have found such a lovely balance between your spiritual expansion and still serving the world in a very 3D public way by working within your local government systems and serving, your fellow townspeople in the ways that you have. So, could you describe that balance a little bit and how much you rely, say, on your spiritual side of yourself to make decisions for this more public 3D world type of activity?
Sure. I mean, again, this wasn't a job I would have gone and applied for. I got invited to be to be on the town board trustees living in town. We had lived here, I don't know, about 12 years or so. And so I had got invited to become on the board. So I went on the board. So I was on the board for about 3 years. And, I found out that everybody was afraid of confrontation. And so I was the only one that spoke up and tried to solve a problem, find a happy medium. Then I got off and I thank God. And then somebody else dropped out the next 4 years and they said, would you come back on? And I said, okay, I'll fill the position. Didn't necessarily want to, because at this time I was doing readings and mediumship readings and all this kind of stuff. Got back on the board. I was on there a few months and I realized nothing is getting done. So I went to the board and I said, do you know what? Nothing's getting done. Why don't you put me on as town manager? And they did. I mean, it only paid like $12 an hour. It was just, they put me on part-time. It's a little poor town. So I got to work writing grants, and I wrote a grant to pay my salary for 3 years. And I just got busy making stuff happen. I mean, in reality, San Luis, perhaps there was an ulterior motive in the fact that it's the place you land when you come to the Casa. It's the little town, and it needed a lot of love, and nobody was loving it, Nobody was championing this little town. And I created my own position, but I knew in my heart I was supposed to do it. And what's interesting, talking about spirit being present in a third dimensional job, because what I've learned is there is no spirit, everything is spiritual. Mm-hmm. We opened this little welcome center, found money to get the welcome center. People walk in. I have these amazing connections with them. I put my little plaque out with Mother Mary and my little paintings. I know you're an artist too, Sally, because I did Mother Mary paintings, and I would meet the coolest people. So there was sort of this synchronistic thing with me being in that space, in the town hall space, but also everything I thought of that we needed to do, the town walked in the door and was handed to me. I didn't have to go searching for things. It was like, oh, I think we want to do a bike track in the park. Let's do something fun for the kids. This out of the blue, a guy calls me that sells these little bike trail kind of things. And then I find out where to go get the money for it. And I write the grant for it. And we get the money for it. And we tear down the whole deal, and now we got a walking path. My big project that I just finished was a town plaza because we don't have any outdoor Main Street gathering spaces. And it took me 5 years, but I was able to bring in the funds to build this little town plaza. And now we're going to have our first event in it on April 5th. So I've kind of retired because Spirit made it clear I haven't fully let go. Again, I'm working on my own stuff, because part of it was, yes, I was a spiritual medium, but it also didn't make me rich being a spiritual medium. It took care of our bills, it took care of everything. I'm not, in reality, even though I'm talkative, I got Gemini rising. I'm an introvert at heart. I don't like promoting myself. I don't, and even talking about in my town manager job, I won 2 awards last year in the state of Colorado for the work that I did in this little town. And I'm like, oh, you mean I got to dress up and go to Denver and get an award? It's like it annoyed me because it's like, no, we got things to do. I don't need the accolades for this. But now we're at this point. The Spirit's made it clear I need to focus on the Casa. So I'm at this in between trying to learn this. I've got to let go of the money. Do you know what I mean? Because it was comfortable, having extra money. And I get my first Social Security check next week. But, oh, thanks. Yeah. um, but I'm going, oh, that's only half what my salary was. So I'm in this knowing I need to let go, but also trying to let go of the fear around letting go of that comfortable money come in. So I'm really, Spirit is a long story, but Spirit really kicked me out. I mean, I was planning on working 3 days a week and turning it over to my town manager and the new young kid that I raised up for 2.5 years. And the day after he became town manager and I was just going to support him, this was the big thing I learned. This is where I learned about my people pleasing and that kind of thing. He dumped all his frustrations about how he wanted to do everything I was doing. And so I felt very pushed out the door and thrown under the bus after I'd spent 2.5 years nurturing this kid, and he threw me under the bus. And so that was the whole lesson that I learned, do you know what I mean, of how I was a people pleaser. And like, it was a perfect lesson, but it was a huge one because I'd been carrying that load for 68 years. That's how old I am now,
Mhm.
So anyway,
And
I'm almost done.
to be non-attached to that outcome, that's part of your lesson. I mean, okay, so this happened. I did what I came here to do, and I can let it go.
Exactly. And it's funny, back in October, and I should have gotten the lesson then. You know how hard-headed we are, you know. I should have gotten that lesson but I was on my way to a conference back in October, just bought brand new car, 2025, super rare Forester. First time I've had a nice car, you know, moon roof, leather seats, heated, steering wheel and that kind of stuff.
I
On
have the same car.
you do good. That year,
2021.
2021, yeah. So we're driving to this conference. It was a Main Street conference for town. We get almost to Ghost Spring, and a deer runs smack dab in front of us. Boom, couldn't miss it, 10 feet. Crunched my front of my car. Still don't have my car back because it's 2025. It takes a while to get parts. Well, a female deer is my spirit animal. And every time I meditate, there she is. And I'm thinking, that is universe telling me, turn around, you're not going in the right direction. And so, the struggle between letting go, because I learned a lot and I made the town my family. And I think that's where the hardest thing would be, letting go of what I made my family and moving on and saying, now it's time to do this work with the Casa. And so I'm at the edge of saying, let's be totally done. Dive in, take a leap of faith, and see where spirit takes us. And you think could easily do that. But now that we're older, now that I'm older and I've got Milt to take care of, who's 93, and it's like, do I need that extra money coming in? So it's that little struggle of spirit nudging me out of the nest and saying, just let go and see where it goes.
Yeah. And they will help us. They do assist us.
Yeah, they have all my
Yeah.
ever since I started my spiritual journey. You know,
I I don't know anyone that's retired that felt like I have enough. I mean, I'm sure there are those people. I just don't know any of them. But I certainly didn't. I had to take a leap of faith when I retired because it was a cut in income, quite substantial. But I just had to take that leap. And if I'd known all the things that were coming down the pike, it really did not fit with my retirement plan. But not my choice. I mean, I'm riding the wave of my life experience.
right? And you think I would be comfortable because Milton and I rode the wave for 25 years. We just followed spirit and did that. And yet I knew I was supposed to go into that town manager because I learned I was a lot smarter than I realized. And that was another thing that was healed because, like I didn't go to college and I didn't do all the smart things. And
That skill set that you've developed in being a town manager may serve you very well in managing Casa de Santa Maria. And so it may well have been that, yeah, you were there for the time you needed just to learn. But I totally understand having to be almost kicked out by spirit from the last thing they sent you to into the next thing because it
exactly.
can be so hard.
It is hard. It was like when we moved to Australia and I'm going, oh, can I be that way far away from my kids? Can I be that? Yet we did it
Yeah.
and we survived it and we didn't have a job. And it's like, remember that, Susan, just because I know the time for the Casa is now. The inner, they certainly, oh, and one more, you want another mystical story?
Mm.
So
Yes.
after the vortex thing and the angel pictures, Christy showed up, anchored the portal. She comes back every once in a while. So she came back in October of the next year and brought her little RV and parked it. And we're standing there and she's trying to level, have to level RVs. We look up and there's this huge white bird, look size of an eagle, it was huge, circling over the building. We're looking at this thing, going, is that the white bird? But I thought a dove had come up. It didn't look that big. And I'm going, look at that bird. And this bird stops midair, stands up on its feet, and just does hovers, standing straight up. We're looking at this thing, and it soared some more, and then it would stop, stand up on its feet, midair, and just hover. And it did it about 5 times. And in the picture that I send you, you look at when you see the Mother Mary in the cloud and the heart above her head, behind it is this huge, what looks like a white bird right behind it. So I hadn't figured out the whole white bird thing. Somebody said, well, is it a phoenix? And I go, I don't know. But the white bird was here. And a friend of mine saw that white bird as well. This huge white bird. But have you ever seen a bird stand up on its feet and hover? And it's another one of those, okay, well, I don't know what that is, but there it is.
So yes, I've never seen a bird do that. But we're famous for going down the rabbit hole and looking for the meanings of all these symbols. So
Yes, if you find out, let me know because I don't know what it was.
yeah, I'm very curious.
And I go, maybe it didn't have the tail of it. It really looked like a pure white eagle, that size and that big. It looked that big. I've had another experience where a friend came and stayed with us, and he was kind of skeptical, working on his spiritual journey. And he was out doing some work for us. And anyway, he decided to go walk the Divine Feminine Labyrinth. And I was out and I came home and I got out of the car and it sounded like hundreds of doves cooing. And there were no birds anywhere, just nowhere. And I'm walking all over looking, where are these birds? and he's walking the labyrinth, and then as soon as he got off the labyrinth, the divine feminine labyrinth, it stopped. And so when I talked to him, I said, "Didn't you hear that?" He said, "Yeah, I thought, couldn't figure out what that was." And um, and I said, "Well, when did it start?" And he said, "The minute I stepped onto the divine feminine labyrinth." And it ended the minute he stopped off. And I said, "I'd asked for a miracle for you. I didn't know it would come in the way of birds, you know." So there's a lot of bird connections with Mother Mary. And also the day we put the statue in, we had a UFO show up. So I can send you that picture as well. I didn't know I got a picture of it, but it was this silver egg sitting out way back about half mile back, just off the ground. But I had invited them. I thought the day before I meditated, and I said, "Wouldn't it be cool if the crop circle makers showed up?" And sure enough, they did.
Interesting.
Yeah, I had seen it earlier with my eyes. I had hose in my hand, and I looked up and I saw it sitting up north. And, and I'm looking at, you know how your brain's trying to figure out what it is, you know? And I put the hose down, I looked up and it was gone. And I go, "Oh, Mills, I just saw a UFO." But then it showed up in the picture, the very last picture I took of the day after we had put her in. And there's this beautiful pink light coming from the sun straight to the statue. So I'll send that to you as well.
Susan, you mentioned that you had some books you'd like to offer to the viewers. And maybe if people want to get in touch with you to visit the Casa, or is it just open to anyone at any time?
Free to anyone.
So are you open to people contacting you?
Yes, we are open
Okay.
to people. The best way to contact us is through our website, casadesantamaria.org. We are a nonprofit, and it tells you all about the Casa and Mother Mary's Garden. It's got some videos, and if it's okay, I can link this video up for you guys onto our website. But anybody that signs up to get our newsletters about our retreats and what's going on, and just, you know, spiritual information in our newsletter that we send out probably about once a month or twice a month, we'll send you 4 of our PDF books. One is Conversations with Mama. Conversations with Mama is channeled messages that I received from Milk Mom after she passed away. This is one of our first books, and it talks about her experience in the afterlife. And you read that book, didn't you, Gary? Yes.
I did. Yeah.
And The Reluctant Medium. And that's my kind of story of my awakening and moving into, and my very first reading, which was pretty spectacular in itself, but it was the first time I ever did a reading, and I had to go to someone's house, and it was where her daughter had committed suicide in the house, and she was stuck, the daughter was stuck in the house, and we were able to release her. And of course, first reading, my, was that intense, you know. That's kind of my first introduction into doing readings. It was in The Reluctant Medium. Or you can find it, we can send you Welcome Back Little Child, which is just that story. But in The Reluctant Medium, it's about my story, and then we tell that first reading story. The other book we can send is also, I call it, How Come When I Talk to God, That's Okay. If God talks to me, people think I'm crazy. So I call it the crazy book. And it's my channeled messages from the Holy Spirit, or from Spirit, about my early awakening and how I was taught. It was Hester B. Jackson that taught me to be a medium from the other side. So I wasn't born with this gift. It was because I went looking for God, and everybody else came along the way. Basically, I went straight to source, but I got everybody else along the way. And then the other book are messages from Mother Mary's heart, and they're little channeled, short little poem messages from Mother Mary, that I would spend time channeling, meditating on somebody, and ask for a message from her for them. And that's how these messages came through, was that I would ask Mother Mary for messages for people. And this is just like a book of those messages, because it's meant really for everyone. You know, her love is for everyone.
Susan, it's been delightful having you with us today. Thank you so much. And I just hope this reaches more people through this medium that find out about the Casa, that might be on a journey somewhere and can stop by and experience the incredible energy that is generated there. And thank you again for being with us.
Well, no, you guys are loved, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this content, please hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications.